Hundreds of thousands of years ago, the wild world did not necessarily belong to the strongest, nor did it always favor the fastest. Across vast, sweeping savannas and deep within the mist-shrouded forests of the Ice Age, survival often came down to countless tiny decisions made second by second, breath by breath. You could spend weeks crafting razor-sharp flint spears capable of piercing thick hides. You could memorize migration routes and seasonal movements with remarkable precision. But all of those hard-earned skills could become meaningless in a single fragile moment if the wind suddenly shifted. From the other side of the dense brush, the grazing herd couldn't see them at all. It hadn't heard a single sound beneath the carpet of rotting leaves, but it caught something else, a scent, one that many wild animals may have learned to associate with danger over countless generations: human scent. For many prehistoric animals, the sense of smell was among the most important survival tools they possessed. An extraordinarily sensitive early warning system refined through millions of years of evolution. Our ancestors lacked thick insulating fur to endure freezing winters. They had no massive claws to defend themselves against the dangers of the Ice Age. And as they moved across the landscape, their bodies naturally released a constantly changing mixture of chemical compounds into the surrounding air. How did prehistoric hunters, creatures that appeared physically disadvantaged beside enormous Ice Age animals, manage to approach their prey closely enough to hunt? They certainly had no modern scent-eliminating products or specialized camouflage equipment. Instead, archaeology, ethnographic evidence, and experimental research suggest they may have relied on surprisingly simple natural materials and a deep understanding of how scent behaves in the environment. To understand that remarkable survival strategy, we first need to step into a world where smell could influence life and death every single day. To understand how prehistoric hunters may have managed their scent, we first need to look at the microscopic world of the human body, a place where our own biology constantly releases chemical signals into the surrounding environment. Humans are among the few mammals that rely heavily on sweating across much of the body to regulate temperature during prolonged physical activity. As we walk, run, climb, or hunt over long distances, acrine and apocrine sweat glands produce a complex mixture of water, mineral salts, proteins, lipids, and other compounds. Fresh sweat itself carries relatively little odor, but once it interacts with the diverse community of microorganisms naturally living on human skin, particularly bacteria belonging to groups such as Corynebacterium and Staphylococcus, those compounds begin to change. As bacteria break down components of sweat and skin oils, they produce a variety of volatile organic compounds, commonly known as VOCs. Together, these airborne molecules create much of what we recognize as individual human body odor. Among the many compounds associated with human scent are molecules such as 3-methyl-2-hexanoic acid, along with numerous other volatile substances released through sweat and skin. To us, these odors may simply signal that someone has been working hard or exercising. For many wild animals with highly developed senses of smell, however, they can provide valuable information about what or who has recently passed through an area. Large herbivores such as wild horses, reindeer, antelope, and mammoths likely possessed highly developed senses of smell that, in many situations, exceeded our own. Many mammals also possess an additional sensory structure known as the vomeronasal organ, which is involved in detecting certain chemical signals, particularly pheromones and other biologically important compounds. Together with their primary olfactory system, these sensory abilities allow animals to gather an extraordinary amount of information from scents carried by the wind. Through experience and perhaps over evolutionary time through natural selection, many prey animals likely became increasingly sensitive to odors that were consistently associated with predators, including humans. That meant wind direction could become one of the most critical factors in a hunt. Approaching from downwind often allowed scent to reach the prey long before the hunter ever came into view, greatly increasing the chance that the animal would flee before an attack could begin. Faced with that challenge, prehistoric hunters may have gradually developed practical ways to reduce, disguise, or blend their own scent into the surrounding environment. They weren't chemists in the modern scientific sense, but generations of careful observation may have taught them something equally valuable. In nature, scent follows patterns, and those patterns could sometimes be used to their advantage. The first solution may have been one of the simplest. It lay directly beneath their feet. Wet mud, clay, mineral-rich soil gathered from marshes, riverbanks, and damp ground. Archaeologists and ethnographers have long noted that people in many cultures used mud for camouflage, protection from insects, and shielding the skin from harsh environmental conditions. It is possible that prehistoric hunters discovered another practical benefit through repeated experience. Covering exposed skin with a thick layer of wet earth may have helped reduce the amount of scent escaping directly from the body, while also making human outlines blend more naturally into the surrounding landscape. Rather than functioning like a perfect chemical barrier, the mud may simply have slowed the release and movement of some odor-producing compounds while replacing them with the familiar smell of damp earth. The effect probably wasn't complete, but hunting rarely depended on becoming completely invisible. Sometimes reducing detection by even a small margin could allow hunters to move several precious steps closer before an animal became suspicious. Modern experimental studies and field observations suggest that mud can also cool the skin as moisture evaporates while forming a protective layer between the body and the surrounding air. Whether prehistoric hunters intentionally understood these physical effects can never be known. What seems more likely is that generations of observation taught them which natural materials consistently improve their chances during a hunt. For some hunting groups, mud alone may not have been the end of the story. Across forests, wetlands, and river valleys, countless plants naturally release powerful aromatic compounds into the air. The bark of oaks, chestnuts, pines, firs, and many other plants contains high concentrations of tannins along with numerous other naturally occurring chemicals responsible for their distinctive scents. It is possible that experienced hunters experimented with mixing crushed bark, leaves, roots, or other vegetation into wet mud. Whether their goal was improving camouflage, reducing insects, masking body odor, or simply taking advantage of materials readily available in the environment is impossible to determine with certainty. Whatever the original purpose, such mixtures would have carried the familiar smells of damp soil, decaying leaves, tree bark, fresh sap, and forest vegetation. Those were scents that wild animals encountered every day throughout their natural habitat. Instead of introducing something unfamiliar into the landscape, hunters may have been surrounding themselves with odors already woven into the environment. That doesn't necessarily mean animals became unable to detect humans. But under favorable conditions, blending human scent with the countless natural odors already present in the landscape may have made recognition more difficult or at least delayed it long enough to improve hunting opportunities. Success still depended on wind direction, distance, patience, and countless other variables that no disguise alone could overcome. Even so, these simple mixtures remind us of something remarkable, long before chemistry became a science. Humans may already have been learning its lessons directly from nature. Nature is never static. Seasons changed, landscapes changed, weather changed. Thick mud camouflage may not always have remained practical during long journeys across dry grasslands or extended hunting expeditions. Under those changing conditions, some hunting groups may have experimented with an entirely different approach. Instead of trying to eliminate their own scent completely, they may have tried to overwhelm it with smells already familiar to the surrounding ecosystem. Ethnographic studies of some relatively recent hunter-gatherer societies describe practices such as rubbing animal fat, dung, musk, or parts of harvested animals onto the body or clothing before hunting. These observations do not prove that Ice Age hunters everywhere followed the same methods. However, they demonstrate that using naturally occurring animal scents as part of hunting traditions has appeared in multiple cultures separated by both geography and time. Whether similar strategies were also used tens of thousands of years earlier remains an open question, but it is certainly a possibility worth considering. If such scent masking practices were used, why might they have helped? The answer may lie not only in an animal's nose, but also in the way its brain interprets familiar information. Wild herbivores constantly encounter countless scents drifting through the landscape. Other members of their herd, neighboring animals, damp vegetation, soil, water, decaying leaves. Most of these odors carry no immediate threat. They simply form part of the animal's normal sensory world. If a hunter's own scent became partially mixed with these familiar environmental odors, recognition might have become more difficult under the right conditions. That does not mean an animal would mistake a human for another member of its herd. Nor would such a disguise guarantee success. Wind direction, distance, weather, humidity, and the animal's own level of alertness could all determine the outcome. Even so, delaying recognition by only a few extra seconds might sometimes have been enough to make the difference between a successful approach and a failed hunt. Some ethnographic accounts also describe hunters applying animal fat to help plant materials or natural scents remain on the skin and clothing for longer periods. Whether prehistoric hunters used fat in exactly the same way cannot be confirmed. But as a naturally adhesive material, it could plausibly have helped aromatic compounds remain on the body longer than water alone. More importantly, these possible techniques reveal something remarkable. Our ancestors were not simply reacting to nature. They may have been carefully observing how animals perceive the world and adapting their own behavior accordingly. Then came one of humanity's greatest turning points, the mastery of fire. Fire transformed prehistoric life in countless ways. It provided warmth during freezing winters, extended activity beyond daylight, made many foods safer and easier to digest, and offered protection against at least some predators. Yet it may also have provided another, less obvious advantage: smoke. Wood smoke is far more than a cloud of drifting particles. As wood burns, especially resin-rich species such as pine and fir, it releases a complex mixture of gases and aromatic compounds, including phenols and many other substances that give smoke its distinctive scent. Some of these compounds are known to possess antimicrobial properties, while others readily cling to skin, hair, clothing, and animal hides. Long hours spent around campfires would almost certainly have left prehistoric hunters carrying the unmistakable smell of smoke wherever they traveled. What effect might that have had during a hunt? The answer remains uncertain, but several possibilities have been proposed. In many natural environments, the smell of light wood smoke would not necessarily have been completely unfamiliar. Lightning-caused fires, smoldering vegetation, and naturally burned landscapes have existed long before humans mastered fire. Many wild animals therefore evolved in environments where traces of smoke occasionally formed part of the surrounding scent landscape. That does not mean animals ignored smoke. Heavy wildfire smoke can trigger avoidance behavior in many species, but a faint lingering scent carried on a hunter's clothing may not always have produced the same response. Instead, smoke may simply have become one more environmental odor mixed among countless others carried by the wind. Some researchers have suggested that smoke lingering on hides and clothing could also have reduced or altered portions of the natural human scent profile. Exactly how effective that may have been remains impossible to measure for prehistoric hunting. Nevertheless, the idea fits a broader pattern seen throughout this story, again and again. Our ancestors may have learned to work with the chemistry already present in nature, rather than trying to overpower it. Fire did more than provide warmth. It may also have become another subtle tool that helped humans blend more successfully into the environments they depended upon for survival. Long before firearms, long before advanced equipment, long before laboratories could explain molecules and chemical reactions, our ancestors achieved something extraordinary. They survived not by matching the physical strength of the animals around them, but by learning to understand the natural world in ways few other species could. Rather than trying to overpower nature, they observed it, they adapted to it, they experimented with it. Whether using mud from wetlands, aromatic plants, animal-derived materials, or the lingering scent of smoke, prehistoric hunters may have gradually assembled a collection of practical techniques shaped by countless generations of trial and error. No single method would have guaranteed success. Wind direction still mattered, weather still mattered, animal behavior remained unpredictable. But together, these observations may have helped hunters improve the odds ever so slightly, and in a world where survival often depended on the smallest advantage. Even a modest improvement could become enormously valuable. What makes these possible strategies remarkable is not simply the materials themselves. It is the way they reflect a growing ability to observe invisible patterns, and to use those patterns in increasingly sophisticated ways. The story of prehistoric scent strategies is ultimately about far more than hunting. Whether every technique described here was practiced exactly as we've imagined may never be known with certainty. Archaeology offers fragments. Ethnography provides valuable comparisons. Modern biology helps explain what might have been possible. Together, they allow us to reconstruct one of humanity's most fascinating survival stories. If these ideas are even partly correct, then our ancestors were already thinking far beyond simple weapons. They were studying wind, moisture, plants, animals, fire, and the invisible chemistry connecting them all. That may be one of the defining characteristics of our species. Human evolution was shaped not only by stronger tools, but by a growing ability to recognize hidden patterns, to adapt, to experiment, and to turn knowledge into survival. Perhaps that was humanity's greatest advantage all along.